ښه. د ذبیح الله مجاهد هغه دی وکړه پریس کانفرنس. ولا ډیر ښه وغږېده. او ډیر. چې دا زوی مړی د کوم ځای نه راغلو.
welcome to the AFGHANEYE YouTube channel. If this is your first visit, make sure to subscribe and press the notification bell so that you won't miss any of our new videos. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another AFGHANEYE Live. I'm your host Sangar Paikar.
I'm ahmed-waleed.
And today we have a guest. Our dear friend Habib Wardak is with us again. We have many important matters to discuss today, so we are very happy to have you here with us, Habib. Welcome.
I'm very happy to Thank you very much, Sangar. Thank you very much, Wali Jana.
Okay, guys in the chat, all of you, welcome. We are so glad to have you all with us again. So today, the most important topic is...
Guys, can you hear me? Is there still an echo?
Yes.
Apparently there's an echo.
Okay.
Oh, Habib Wardak has an echo.
Yeah, now I think the echo is now gone. Habib, can you say
Everyone is
something?
saying that
Am I audible? I don't think my side has an echo. Things look pretty good on my side.
Yes, no, the echo is solved. Okay, now it's gone. Okay, so the most important story of today is the press conference in Kabul, where Zabiullah Mujahid, the spokesman of the Taliban, who was basically responding to all media inquiries and gave all interviews for how long? 15, 20 years?
Roughly that.
Yeah, he appeared for the first time and he showed his face. So for most people who have been talking to him for more than a decade, for some people even 2 decades, they never saw his face. So it was quite an eventful day for people to finally see who is this man. And during the press conference, many important matters were discussed. There were journalists who asked very critical questions from Zabiullah Mujahid. And we watched the entire press conference very carefully. So we're going to discuss what was said during the press conference. But we have other very important news as well. We have a new president in Afghanistan because Amrullah Saleh, the vice president from the former regime, he has released an audio clip from a goat shed in Panjshir, and he was reading the English translation of the constitution of the former regime. And he was saying that according to that constitution, he is now the legitimate president of Afghanistan. We're going to listen to that audio clip later on. Yeah, so first of all, before we dive into all the major stories, I just want to ask our guest, what is your impression of the last 2 days? What are the first initial thoughts in your mind right now?
To be honest, I think so far it has been very, very smooth. Mind you, when we talk about revolutions, forget about revolutions, riots, simple riots. Forget about regime changes and a transition where there's a vacuum. We are living in a vacuum right now. There is no doubt about it. You get to see a lot of abnormalities and irregularities. The riots that happened in London years back, how much of lootings we have had. The riots which were there in the US 2 times, once when it was about the Black Lives Matter, just recently, and then the issue of the Capitol Hill. You know, what we witnessed was horrible. So the assumption was that when that transition is happening in Afghanistan, in specific to Kabul, we might see a return of 1992. And Afghanistan was right there on the brink of that. You had people in Kabul who were indulging in robberies and looting and plundering for the past many years. Warlords, bonds, and there was nobody. The government had run away. President Ghani had loaded his helicopter with stashes of Benjamin Franklin currency notes with his cronies, and there was a vacuum. And it would not be fair to say that nothing happened. You had people who started looting people, they went into houses. There was an immense amount of fear, and specific to people who were working with NDS, with various security agencies, people who worked as support staff to the international community, senior government employees. There was an immense amount of fear, despite the fact that you had constant messages coming from the Taliban saying that there is a general amnesty, regardless of whoever you are, whoever you were, whatever role you played in terms of this occupation, there is a general amnesty. But there was a fear, and you had people going into houses. Now, that rumor, that news started to spread very fast. Remember, telecommunication services were not cut off, so people were still communicating with each other. And that sort of fear started to grow exponentially. And that is when you had a tweet coming from Zabiullah Mujahid, if I'm correct, himself, that now the Taliban forces should go to Kabul because the government security forces had vacated their offices, they had left. Now there was a vacuum that needs to be filled. Overnight, you had reinforcements coming from areas such as Ghazni, Wardak, Logar, the nearby provinces, and that basically filled the vacuum to an extent. Remember, when I say filled the vacuum to an extent, I just mean they were there for law and order. There is still no government in place. There is no state in place at the moment. Just to be very, very honest, I mean there are no sort of authorized due processes. A lot of things are still not there. From what I know, there is no money in the ATM machines. Banks are still closed, but fear was there nonetheless. And the way they maintained law and order overnight, operator services were started to function within the Kabul police headquarters and the Ministry of Interior. People were given numbers, constant messages coming and becoming viral of Mullah Yaqub, the deputy of the organization, which is basically responsible for the military wing, that no Taliban fighters are allowed to pursue personal motives, knock on people's door, ask for properties, ask for vehicles or weapons. That should be stopped. From what I've heard from credible sources, instances such as those actually happened in quite a few places, but that was not the norm. It was an exception. And as soon as people started to complain about it, those fighters or those commanders who were there doing the abnormal stuff against the recommendations coming from the leadership, they were automatically removed, and assurances were given to the residences. The first night was horrible. People talking to distant family, friends in Kabul. Everybody was at home. There was a constant fear, and international community played its role in making that far more worse. Rumors spread that anybody who is in danger or who thinks that their life is in danger under the Taliban regime, they can just make it to the airport and they'll be somewhere in Western Europe or Northern America within the next flight. So you had masses of people going into the airport. Mind you, I think there was an agreement between the Taliban and the international community to not touch the airport because of the international evacuation that is there. For those of you who don't understand the topography of Kabul, so airport is actually quite close to the presidential palace in the green zone where the diplomatic offices were located. And the way Kabul International Airport is built is in a way is that it's shared by both military and the civilian, and they have a joint air traffic control center. So you had thousands of people going in. I had friends who were booked on the next flight. Suddenly, flight started canceling because now it was taken over by the military, by the American military. And the next morning, the footages that we saw, I think that'll be in the history for a very very long time. It wasn't. It didn't. Um, you know, I've seen the footages of Saigon when Saigon actually fell to the hands of Vietnamese. Saigon is today Ho Chi Minh City. But I think it was far, far more worse than that specific incident was far more worse than Saigon. And the American intervention slash occupation, whatever word you're comfortable with, whatever definition you're comfortable with, literally ended there. Um, what the Taliban did was the police officers were occupied. They installed their men. They were on constant patrols. Overnight, 200 thieves, robbers, plunderers were taken into custody, and fear spread among people. And basically, you have to understand that Kabul is a humongous city. It's roughly, it has a population of 6 million people, a lot of property there, a lot of wealth located there, and it was basically made sure that nothing of that sort happens. Yes, exceptions were there, but it was tried to it was prevented for as much as it could be. Now, this actually contributed a lot into sending a positive message, because the next day the Taliban met the former governments or regimes, whatever word you're comfortable with, health minister, and he was asked to continue his job. You had Taliban going into hospitals, meeting women doctors, and assuring them of their freedom, about their right to work and contributing to the society. You had Taliban going into Tulu News and disarming their guards, and basically now taking the confidence of the Tulu News, saying that your security's responsibility is now upon us. You had
If I may, I have a
yes.
question. Uh, why was it necessary? Why did they disarm the guards at those TV stations? Like, okay, Taliban are now in Kabul; they are not going to attack. But why? Surely there may be other groups. We have Daesh in Afghanistan. They may want to go and attack a TV station. So why is it? Why did they disarm those people?
So I think part of the strategy is, I think that is exactly what they did in 96, 94 to 96, all the way until 1999, was that they were on this massive campaign of disarming the Afghan population.
Yes.
Because the idea is that disarming will contribute into the security of the general population in the short run and also in the long run. So they also look at it that, because now we are here, you don't require personal security. Your security is our responsibility. Now, because we are the state, um,
It's
the
very statist. It's
yes,
very modern as well, in a
yes.
sense.
So because now we are the state, you need to give us the guns because you don't require them anymore, and we cannot let it go with you, because that might be used and sort of perhaps against the state, against the people. There's a whole lot risk to it. This is exactly what happened in 19. I don't know if you've heard of this process called the DDR process,
Yes. Yes.
post 2001. I think what they did in 90s between 94 to 99 was, if on a far bigger level of a DDR across the country. Mind you, when we talk about post 1992, Mujahideen were armed to the teeth.
Yeah.
You had a lot of weapons that were left by the Soviets, then by Dr. Najib's government, and it fell into the hands of various warlords across the country.
You
And
know, this reminds me of Karim, our friend. Yeah.
yes,
Okay. So he has very witty jokes. So when we heard the stories all these huge military garrisons in the north of the country just basically surrendering and giving up all their weapons. So somebody was asking Karim, like, what's going on? He said, you see, this is basically DDR process, but now the Taliban are doing it.
And it's sort of, yes, in a way, but it's because I said, we are still in a vacuum. We are still in a vacuum. The formulation of the government needs to happen as soon as possible, and then it'll make sense that we need to continue on disarming the Afghan population, because in the long run and as well as in the short term, this is very important for the security of the general Afghan public. Now, coming back to what happened, they started approaching the mayor of Kabul to continue the provision of services. Today, we had one of their commanders going into Tulu News, having an interview. Now, these little bits of pieces count a lot in terms of gaining the confidence of the population of Kabul, who are scared. There is no doubt about it. Anybody who says that they are not, there's no fear among them, there is fear among them. One of the problem is that because you had a group that has now gone into Kabul, who does not have a uniform, who does not have an ID card to sort of prove their identity, and anybody could basically wear the same uniform, and it basically becomes very difficult to distinguish as of who is a Taliban and who is not a Taliban. And I'm sure this will take time to basically fix. But yet again, what I'm going to say is that when we talk about revolutions, government changes, when there is a vacuum, it could get perhaps 1 gazillion times worse than what we saw. I think the international community is also a bit of shocked, I would say, for how this whole transition has been managed, because the expectation was that first you will have an urban warfare in Kabul. The good thing was that President Ghani, along with his cronies, they ran away. There was nobody else to resist, and there was a peaceful transition in a way. That's a good thing, because it prevented a lot of bloodbath. But the paradox here is that when Ghazni was handed over to the Taliban, they put the Ghazni's governor into jail. Somebody should now do that to President Ghani. He should go to jail as well, going by that principle. Yeah, you do have people who are spreading misinformation, who are still trying to spread fear, and that is not going to help the cause, to be very, very honest.
So why do you think they're doing that, Habib? And who, when we're talking about the spread of misinformation, who are you talking about specifically? So, by the way, guys, there's just before you answer, Habib, we've just got a new patron, and just like last night, I'm not going to mention their name, but for the person you know and we know who you are, that is much appreciated, and we will be in contact. We've got multiple apparently ISI patrons, but we'll be in contact shortly, inshallah ta'ala. We're deeply humbled that you consider our platform worthy of supporting, not just by viewing and sharing our content, but also with your money. Now, Habib, what is behind the spread and misinformation? Because here's the thing, right? Propaganda is part of warfare. There are always ministries of information or ministries of misinformation, depending on where you are. The two of them go hand in hand. But there's no impetus anymore. President Ghani has fled. Mariam Suleiman Khail has fled. The inner clique of dual national Tamiyan, as they became notorious as, they've all left. There's no resistance here anymore. What's the impetus, and who do you think in particular are sort of pushing a narrative of misinformation and trying? And yeah, someone in the comments in the live chat is saying war is deception. Exactly, Sun Tzu. But there is no war anymore. They lost. So what is the reason, and who do you think especially is pushing this misinformation?
So, for example, this gentleman, Frood Bejan. I don't know if I'm spelling his, if I'm saying his name correctly. He works for the Radio Free Liberty, which is based out of
He
Prague.
blocked me.
Prague.
Okay.
He's blocked. And for those asking me why he's blocked me, just like Bilal Sarwari, basically, you remember, Habib, when first the district started to fall and surrender en masse, and this guy was basically saying, who cares about these petty districts? The provincial capitals and centers haven't fallen. So then Zaranj fell, which was the capital of Nimroz province, and he was like, who cares about Zaranj? You know, it's not really, it's just some district sort of town. And then he was saying that, and he kept saying that Western journalists have a responsibility to not echo the Taliban narrative of victory, as in the conclusion is still not foregone. We're still yet to see the conclusion. And then after each and every city started falling, he tried downplaying it. So then I was like, you know, I was like, your script is basically writing itself by this stage. But yeah, you know, Kabul bubble journalists, they can't really stomach any criticism. Neither does Kabul bubble exist anymore.
The bubble has imploded.
The bubble's imploded.
Based on my own analysis, I may be wrong. I might be right in terms of saying why are they doing that. But just coming back to your point that when Zaranj, they were saying that, you know, we control the population and the Taliban controls the deserts and barren lands. So let them do that, okay? And they wouldn't take it seriously because they were having their ball. They were having their best time of their lives, you know. Political tourists, as we would say, you know, come up with any kind of excuses just to save themselves. We have this story. We'll just go from Realpolitik into a very Wardaki story.
Please.
Back home when there's drought, okay. So people have two worries. We have a lot of apple orchards, and the two worries is that how do you find water? Forget about getting money from your crop this year, because you just have to save the trees. And number two is when it's drought, you don't have much of a greenery left. So this mid-sized rats, they appear everywhere.
Okay.
And what they do is they bite on the skin of the tree, around, like all around it. And once the connection between the skin of the tree is lost, somewhere 2-3 weeks down the line, the tree dries out by itself, because it doesn't make sense, right? So a lot of farmers, they actually lose their trees not because of the drought, but because of these rats, and they just become too many. Okay, so there's this person who has a very good crop of wheat, and the next morning when he wakes up, the entire field is gone. Generally, rats will have a tree 1, 2, 3 at max, like just the skin of it, roundabout, a very small portion of it, and it dries out. It's good enough for the rat, but it has a lot of economic implications. So the next morning when he wakes up, his entire crop of wheat is gone. And because his neighbor is way powerful and he knows that it's his neighbor's sheep, that are about 700 of those sheep that have come down and have eaten his entire crop, but he can't say anything about it. So people ask him, who has done it? Who has done it? He's like, these are the rats. These are the rats. The rats have done it. So,
Okay.
and Pashto we say patay tul wukhado audi osam magabuli. So,
okay. Habib, I have a question. Hamed Sadat in the chat asked an important question, and I want to pose that question to you if you would like to answer. He said, the Taliban say to everyone, please go to work. No problem, go to work. But who is going to pay their wages? The international community has left. They have declared that they are going to cut aid. We know that the economy in Afghanistan is built up in the last 2 decades entirely on foreign aid and military occupation. So when all of that is gone, all these services, public service, healthcare, all these other facilities, the civil service, the bureaucracy, who's going to pay for them? The banks are closed. So what does it mean? Go to work.
That's actually a very good question. To be honest, Hamidjana, there are a lot of gray areas right now. Even looking and analyzing the press conference of Zabiullah Mujahid, there are a lot of gray areas that still exists. What we are talking about is that there is a principle perhaps now in place. Principally, there is something in place that we might be able to analyze. But when we talk about the details of it, there are still a lot of gray areas. Um, um, they're asked to continue work, but under which due processes? Because when we talk about due processes, we're talking about a law. So do we follow what was there before, or do you have something of your own in place? The banks are closed. I assume that they will open very shortly, given that if the security situation is maintained the way it is and further improves, there's confidence, and banks will open, and a lot of other services will open as well. So, in terms of the payments, I think if you remove corruption, the state has the ability to be able to be self sustaining, given that now you don't require 300,000 security forces. So a lot of that money that was spent on fighting the war that could be diverted into the civilian sort of sector and spent on projects that would lead to the creation of a lot of jobs. And to be honest, if this transition is successful, the entire world is watching right now, and it becomes very, very important for the Taliban to ensure that the confidence of the international community is not lost. We are not talking about aid, we're talking about investment, because just like he said, security is prerequisite for the international investment. China is looking forward to it. Um, uh, Perhaps Europe, the United States of America, there's a huge opportunity of investment in Afghanistan and specific to its mineral sector. Mind you, I have worked for about 22 days within the Ministry of Mines and Petroleum when I finally had to resign because of abnormalities and irregularities. So there's a whole potential, but for as long as you have committed and dedicated people who will make sure that these minerals are outsourced, but not at the cost of the exploitation of Afghanistan. So I think there's a huge potential for revenue generation for an Afghan government, which is the key is security, ensuring that there is no corruption, and then obviously we are a consuming economy. There's a lot of revenue generated from customs. I couldn't verify this. Um, I've heard it from a very credible source that for that 1 week when Taliban took over Herat's customs, actually
Islam
the per
Qala.
day Islam Qala, the per day revenue generation of Taliban was far more than the revenue generation of what the Afghan government would generate, the previous Afghan government. And this is in light of very low, sort of slow movement, little movement, because people were scared. Traders had halted their trade, but they still made more revenue as compared to the what the Afghan government would make during normal times. Yes, I've not been able to verify this claim so far. So in the short run, Amajana, there are a lot of gray areas, but there is a lot of potential. When we talk about, yes, the key is there are things that needs to be rectified. When we talk about the future government, we don't need to go back to 1996. When we talk about healthcare, I mean, you need a doctor and somebody with ample amount of experience in the health sector to run that sector. Yes, you should not have a mullah do that. I mean, when we talk
How
about
dare you?
yes, when we talk about an inclusive setup, we're not talking only about the inclusiveness of tribes, ethnicities, Shia, Sunni, various mazhabs. We're talking about the inclusiveness of people coming from different walks of life as well. You know, you need to make sure that you give the right portfolio to the right person. You cannot have mullah managing everything.
I
um,
agree.
that becomes extremely important. And to be honest, one of the problem with the past regime was that it was basically at max 1,000 families that were benefiting, 2,000 families that were benefiting from this whole Ponzi scheme that was there for the past 20 years. That included all of these international contracts and whatnot. But these hardly 50, 60 individuals were rotated on various bases. They would become governors, they would become engineers, they would become generals, they would become, they were basically what we have this phrase sahibul kamalat. You don't need that. You don't need that. You need a specific individual with the right portfolio to to manage and run and execute that specific sector. And you cannot have a mullah basically do everything like it was in 1996. So that needs a very that needs a lot of attention. Other gray areas are just not the salaries, but like I said, this will work out, given that you have commitment, lack of corruption, and revenue will generate. Um,
So, with regard to Zabiullah Said Mujahid's um, press conference, there was something that was very interesting, at least for Western observers. He fired shots at Facebook, right? He basically mocked or questioned their commitment to freedom of speech. Do you guys have any comments about that? I don't actually know what the context was
I mean, I know that.
in which
Okay.
that was asked, but yeah, what do you
Okay.
guys think about that?
Yeah, so the story is that Facebook has officially declared that all Taliban content on their platforms, be it Facebook, Instagram, or WhatsApp, will be banned.
On
So
WhatsApp as well?
yes, so if you share the guruna some tarana whatever, they will make sure that it's censored.
Okay.
And this is, I think, because there is a lot of pressure, a lot of campaigning, especially by many Indians, to sort of deplatform these people. But the Facebook, the company has made that decision.
Mhm.
But yeah, that was what Zabiullah Mujahid during the press conference was referring to.
I see.
mhm.
Well, in any case, guys, so we're going to focus for those that aren't listening. For those we're still sort of in the introductory stages of the live stream, so we're going to focus on a couple of things. Before we do, we forgot to ask people to tweet out the link to this live stream. So as we're getting started now, we're going to get right into sort of very deep into the topics here. I'm going to ask everyone. First of all, I'm watching the like count, like I was the night before and last night and the night before that. Please like the video, because when you like the video, more people will see it and perhaps benefit or learn a thing or two. After all, we have a former official from what was the former Afghan Ministry of Defense here. So please like the video. Thank you. I can see the likes going up. Like the video, and if those of you who found out about this live stream from Twitter or from Instagram, because I've promoted it on Instagram, I've made sure to do that today, please share it on Instagram as well and on Twitter. Share the link so other people can benefit. So
Okay.
let's dissect. We've mentioned very briefly Zabiullah Mujahid's press conference today, but for those people who are watching, they may not know who Zabiullah Mujahid is, and they may not know what was said in that press conference, or indeed why it actually warrants mention or discussion. So Zabiullah Mujahid, do we have a picture of him,
Yes,
Senga?
I'm going to put a picture. of Zabiullah Mujahid. Just bear with me. Maybe.
Incredibly, I have to say, incredibly fluent in both languages.
Yeah, something that is quite rare in among spokespeople in Afghanistan.
Under the previous regime, definitely. But no, I was impressed. His Pashto accent, it sounded Logari-ish to me. I couldn't exactly pin it down, but it did sound like a Ghilji accent. What did you make of it, Sangeet?
Yeah, he's probably from the south of Kabul somewhere.
I thought
For
so.
me, it sounded like Ghazni and there Slimon Khail, no?
Yeah,
I've spoken to Suleiman Khail from Ghazni before, but they sort of more veer towards the southern, as in the Kandari side. His one was more sort of a northern
yeah.
Ghilzi variety,
Okay.
and that was because he didn't say Zai, he said Jai, right? That's something that typically the northerners say more. But anyways, guys, that is Zabiullah Mujahid, kind of what could be said a notorious or a very mysterious figure who's acted as the spokesperson for the Taliban for about the last decade and a half. He has been the go-to. He has been the one claiming all of the attacks, rejecting all of the attacks. Those of you who watch Payam-e-Afghan, which is an Afghan TV channel, if you watch the talk shows when they invite the Taliban spokesperson, it's Zabiullah Mujahid they invite. When Western journalists, this guy has been the go-to, and funnily enough, he's been anonymous without a without a face to the infamous name for the last decade and a half. Today he came out, and we finally got to see what the man looks like. So first of all, my comments were, damn, he was pretty young, younger than I expected. But generally, he does fit the bill. Black bearded, dressed in traditional garb, the turban tied pretty well, and he was always known to be pretty well spoken and measured in his responses to questions. And now, today, he had the first press conference, the first Taliban press conference. Numerous journalists attended it. He was asked many questions. So Sangar and Habib, I'll ask Sangar because we heard quite a bit from Habib and we've already discussed with him some of the press conference. What did you make of the press conference?
Uh, I think that for someone who has been observing the entire peace process, what has been said in the media by the Taliban for the last several years, nothing that he said was actually new. Okay?
I
Nothing.
agree.
I heard nothing new in that entire press conference, but I think that the fact that most of the issues that he discussed while facing the people and while answering their questions is the most significant aspect of this press conference. And I also think that some of the topics that were discussed during the press conference and the questions are uh, new to many people. Like, for instance, what he said about the amnesty, what he said about women's education, about Afghanistan, the current situation, security, etc. Because most of it sounded before as just empty promises,
Mhm.
but now that they are in Kabul and they are in charge and life has just presumed to be taken up its normal
The
course.
world didn't end.
Yeah, the world didn't end. The thing is, people were spreading all sorts of stories, rumors, and people expected that when they finally take Kabul, they just will go and massacre everyone. And people were imagining those very scary scenes from the war in Syria and Iraq, those huge massacres by Daesh. Those were the things that people expected. They didn't expect this guy to come and give a press conference when you see security and everything. So that's why this whole press conference was so impressive and uh, shocking for some people because they didn't know what to believe. They didn't know what to see. So that's I think that's the most significant aspect of the press conference, in my opinion.
So, Habib, what would you say? I concur with Sangar's remarks, by the way. A lot of the people just basically that were shocked by this press conference and what was said in it seem to have not been listening to the Taliban for the last 20 years. I mean, I don't know how I feel about the word researcher, but we've been researching the Taliban and reading about them, speaking to people. We've generally had a sense what their stance was, what their avowed political stances were. But a lot of people who listened to this press conference for the first time didn't, and that's why it was significant. Is there anything that you would pick out, though, that you would say in terms of what was or wasn't said that was significant?
So the way I would dissect this whole thing was that it was played out very, very good in a way.
Okay.
Yes, we are still missing details. As a skeptic,
as usual.
Yes, as a skeptic, we are still missing details. But the way it was organized was that in terms of political communication, he had both of his audiences in mind. The international community, there were messages for the international community, and there were messages for the Afghans. In terms of the international community, there was a message. There was a message that respect our territorial integrity, our values, our traditions, and Islam plays a pivotal role in terms of our conduct, internally and externally, and that needs to be respected. He talked about how Europe and Western America, Northern America, has their own values, and based on those values, they have their own systems, and how that differs from the Arab world and Afghanistan, and Central Asia. He talked about Central Asia as well, and how they have their right to decide for themselves. And in light of that, Afghanistan should have that right to basically decide the system for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about how, so there was a lot of, he was trying to give assurances to the international community. And mind you, you have a movement that the international community is watching with 10,000 magnifiers constantly. So the assurances were given that Afghanistan will not be used against any nation, be it in the region, beyond region, and far beyond the region. He also talked about in terms of the international investments and how they should come and contribute into the development of Afghanistan, how they will make sure that security is provided. On the local front, there were assurances given to women. There were assurances given to the international and local media. He basically talked about these three areas of concentration that make sure it does not contradict the values of Islam, make sure that you are not biased and do not take sides. You can criticize us for as long as you want. So he even went to that extent. You can even criticize us for as long as you want. We would love that because that is going to help us fix our system and fix our flaws that we might have. And last but not least, he talked about so there was values, not taking Islam, not taking side, and respecting the Afghan values, the national values, making sure that you do not take on certain ethnicity, language, and which will lead to fragmentation. So he talked about how cohesion is an important element of the Afghan national value, and how it's important for the prosperity of Afghanistan, and that should not be compromised. In terms
So
of,
we could almost say a new Afghan nationalism.
yes, he talked about how women are allowed to work. They are given their rights, but under the sort of the sphere of the Sharia law. Now this is where now the international community's magnifiers gets far more, and they're like, okay, what do you mean by the Sharia law? Do they get to wear burqa? Do they get, or do they just, they can just wear whatever they want? This is where they'll pick and they'll pick stuff. Generally speaking, it was full of a lot of messages, good messages, but we are still awaiting details. And I think those details will not come very soon, because from what I understand is that we are talking about perhaps a loya jirga somewhere down the line, where the constitution will be modified, or completely changed, depending what the loya jirga agrees on. So we're still waiting on those details. Overall, I think it was a wonderful message, and it actually helped, and not some sort of confidence in the international community, but also like locally, it helped a lot. People were listening, people were waiting for it. I had to leave my job and just wait for that press conference, because I
Me
wanted
too.
to see that how things have changed on their end, you know. So I think overall it was
So
wonderful.
you would say it was good or very good PR.
It was a good PR. Personally speaking, I would still wait for the details.
Of
And
course, but in terms of, in just for the time being, in terms of allaying the concerns or the fears of Afghans and the international community, we could say it was good. But now here's a question that I have. You can criticize us as much as you want, all of this stuff. The thing is that currently the Taliban have basically staffed the vacant positions of the previous republic. Would you guys agree with that statement?
Yes.
not all, some.
But we could say that the previous republic basically just fled. It ran
Yes,
away.
yes.
And the leadership, the people doing the day-to-day have remained in their jobs, but the people orchestrating the choir, if we can say that, are now the Taliban. So the republic is still operating, but it's the emirate that is temporarily operating it.
Hmm.
Okay? But now the republic and the structure of the republic, assuming there is even a republic, itself, like Zabiullah Mujahid said, is a provisional state of affairs, right? This isn't going to be the status quo. This is just for the time being, the Taliban had the rug pulled from underneath their feet, and they had to come in to prevent a catastrophe in the form of armed gangs, so on and so forth. Now, when and if these negotiations take place, I remember him talking about all of the Afghan sort of factions will come together in an atmosphere of sort of common understanding and coexistence and cohesion, and they'd make a new sort of setup. Well, these things, is it realistic to expect that you can criticize us as much as you want? You can go about, nothing has changed, go about your business, right? Because by definition, once they hammer out a new agreement, this current state of affairs, which is still the republic, is going to bed. It's finished.
Walijana, to be honest, today I got to see a video
Okay.
where you had a few women who were basically out on a protest in downtown
Yeah, let
Kabul.
me pull that video up, yeah? Okay. Because we have it. We have those videos. So carry on, tell the story, and then I will
All right.
get the video so that our audience know what we're talking about.
So the expectation was that maybe there will be some sort of reaction coming from them, because you had their armed men right around it, and they were chanting, shouting, and asking for their rights. And because right now we are in a transition period, there is, I wouldn't say there's 100% rule of law. You know, the rule of law. There's not much. I mean, okay. And I thought maybe they'll just react to it, and I wasn't feeling good about it, but they didn't. I was quite shocked at the level of their restraint. You know, and I think things have changed, Walijana. But like I said, we are still waiting the details. We are still waiting the details. Um, I hope the details are as good as what we saw as far as this whole general principle is concerned. That
Yeah.
will be my only wish,
Yeah,
that these both collaborate with each other.
I just want to pause here a little moment. So, do you know this square, this roundabout where they're standing? Just
I think it was Wazir Akbar Khan.
yes, yes. So you see four women protesting in front of that ghurfa, that cabin, you have just 4 women, and look, just have a look, okay? So there's one 4x4 Toyota Hilux with heavily armed Taliban who are providing security. But then the camera pans on, and then you see the square in Wazir Akbar Khan, and you see the audience. They are here just to see. So basically, in a city of 6 million people, 4 women protested. What what does that even say? 4 women
You're
in
so
Wazir Akbar Khan.
misogynistic.
Yeah, in Wazir Akbar Khan.
No, 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 Sangarjana, if I may have to interrupt, with
Yeah,
all due respect, I
yeah.
mean, everybody has the right to protest, even though if it was one person protesting, you know, it's their right to protest.
I
I mean,
agree. I agree.
by all means. Um, but to be honest, I expected repercussions, given that you had AK-47s, Taliban soldiers, probably who were not even educated or educated, I don't know, but the restraint shown was quite remarkable.
But I expected that thousands of people would protest. Haven't you seen what was going on in Kabul a week ago? 2 weeks ago? All the Allahu Akbars, all the chanting. Haven't you seen all those activists, the people, the militias with all the machine guns and everything? What happened? Why is it that you don't see masses of people protesting and showing their anger and disagreement?
What
Is
if
it
they're scared?
Yes,
yes?
there is a fear. There is a fear, and basically, people, to be honest, it's very brave of those women to actually come out,
Yeah.
whether they had an agenda or whether they did not have any agenda. They were basically out there on genuine basis. It's
Yeah.
actually very, very brave of them.
Yes,
Um,
see, I don't want to discredit the women for their bravery or anything, but I just wonder why just 4 women? Why not more? Why weren't there thousands of people protesting? And you said they're scared. Okay, I agree, scared. And that's why they're not going out. But this raises a very serious question. If these 4 women are brave enough to go and stand there and just see what's happening, how come the other people who are so adamantly against Taliban, they are not there? Why aren't they standing there with them?
I mean, to be fair, most of those people kind of ran away.
and probably there is fear. The fear factor plays an important role. And to be honest, what I would really want to see in the future is where you have people coming out in masses, and basically demanding for whatever rights, whatever modifications, and and Taliban showing the same restraint. And that is when I think we're moving towards the right direction. And the best part would be modifications actually brought into whatever laws, regulations based on the demands,
But
and
but but do
when
you
they're
think
actually listened.
But do you think that this protest and the restraint shown here may have that triggering effect that people say, wait a minute, you can actually go and protest in their faces, and they won't do anything? Do you think that this will actually build confidence and it will result into more courage and trust and feeling of security among people to say, okay, the regime has fallen, these guys are now in power, but I'm still allowed to go and protest, stand in their face with a banner and shout whatever I want, and they won't touch me?
Yes, so it's a two-way traffic, Sangarjana. It's a two-way traffic. It helps the general public, and then it also helps perhaps the on as far as the credibility, legitimacy, or whatever of the Taliban or the Afghan Islamic or Emiratic, whatever you want to name it, future government. So it's a two-way traffic. But what should be more important is how will these movements, how these protests, or how these masses chanting for rights modifications will help the general life or the cause of the Afghans, the general population. I mean, if it's helping, should be encouraged.
Okay. I want to ask you another question. We have people in the chat who are asking questions. So before we do that, just 1 second, let me pause here. Waleed, have you noted any questions so far?
Yeah, I did actually.
Yes.
I have one question from KJ Khan, who's asking, where do the Taliban see themselves in the international level? Which global camp or alliance do they see themselves have sort of aligning with more?
Should I answer that?
Of course, you should.
Sure. I think at the moment they are trying to they're trying to sort of portray themselves as non-aligned. They need the West for the prosperity of Afghanistan, for their own survival. They need the East for the prosperity of Afghanistan. They need the regional powers for the prosperity of Afghanistan and perhaps for their legitimacy as well. That is what it is. And this is actually what was shown, what we interpreted from the press conference of Zabiullah Mujahid, where he said even the United States is encouraged to have its diplomatic presence in this country. So there is no doubt about it. But if we look at how things have unfolded in specific to post opening of the Doha office about a decade ago,
Yes.
I think they have built excellent relationships with the likes of China, with the likes of Turkmenistan, Russia, Iran, and so I think they have in the statements coming from Russia, the Russian ambassador going out for a walk outside the embassy, saying that he couldn't do that during the regime of Ashraf Ghani. Now he's doing it, and it's much more secure than what it was earlier.
You know, this Russian attitude of constantly discrediting the regime, it is very, very toxic, don't you think?
Yes, yes. So it's really hurting the sentiments and feelings of those who were in power for the past 20 years and who have now run away, unfortunately, and leaving a mess behind. But the Chinese statement was equally important. China has a lot of interest in Afghanistan, and specific to its. So China is a huge country with a humongous population of roughly touching 1.5 billion population. It's in order to keep its pace of development, it requires raw material, it requires resources and minerals, and that is right next door. So they have forged very good relations. Turkmenistan on similar level, they've always had good relations. But I think the Taliban now wants to go beyond that, and they actually want to pursue the policy of non-alignment, where they're not in any camp and everybody is welcome to sort of get what they need, but on not on the cost of exploiting Afghanistan, on fair game, on fair rules. I think that's the message. And at the same time, I think there's this massive. So there's one accusation on the Taliban that it's a Pakistani proxy. I've always been saying this, that in order for an insurgent group, a guerrilla group to survive, external relations, external links are very, very important. Pakistan do have its interest in Afghanistan, so I assume it was always a two-way traffic. There was influence, but that influence, I've been saying this for the past many years now, that influence never got to, never should have translated, was never translated into control. So influence is one thing, control is another thing. And we shouldn't say the Pakistanis controlled the Taliban. It was a genuine local insurgency made of Afghans, rural, majority of them coming from rural Afghanistan across the country. So we should never say that it was a cross-border insurgency.
Okay,
Yes, they had their.
just 1 second. I just want to tell all the guys in the chat. Uh, since yesterday, our channel is monetized, so it means that you can support us via super chat. And today, just moments ago, we received our first super chat from AYK, $499 with the message "Support this page." Thank you very much. We really appreciated your support. And since you are our first super chat donor, we're going to write that down. This is an honorary status for you. Thank you very much. Anyways, so
I'll just finish my
yes,
last two
please.
points. So I think that sphere of influence that is there. I think that will also reduce drastically once with the formation of government, once that Quetta Shura gets transferred to Afghanistan. I assume that the Doha office will also close because there is no need for that anymore. So I think that dependency or that influence, never a control, will reduce drastically. And it's also important in terms of Afghanistan to have the confidence of India. And to be honest, I was never fond of this gentleman called Ahmed Rashid in Pakistan.
Yeah.
But one article that he wrote was "The road to Kabul goes through Kashmir."
Mm.
So that actually kind of made a little sense to me. I think it's time for both India and Pakistan to sort of give up the rivalries in Afghanistan, and because it's going to be a win-win game for both of them. So whoever the friend that asked the question, I assume that the Taliban are now really looking um, at themselves not in the block of anybody. And you had a statement coming from Canada today where they said that they'll not recognize the government of Taliban. Other Western powers are like, we're going to make sure that we monitor them, and it's basically up to the Taliban as of how far they respect the rights of the Afghans. So it's going to be contingent on that. And I hope that confidence comes into play because it's very, very important. One of the reasons back in 1996 up to 2001 when the Taliban was in place, mind you, it was just the Pakistanis, I think Turkmenistan and UAE and Saudi. They had embassies in these four countries. That's what I assume, right? I'm not sure about Turkmenistan though. And the rest of the world had turned their back towards them. And there were sanctions, there was massive poverty. I hope we don't get to reach to that stage. Eventually, the Pakistanis sold them out very, very badly. Mullah Baradar was in jail for a very long time. Mullah Ubaidullah died in Pakistani prison. It was very, very unfortunate. But we as an Afghans, regardless of who is in power, two expectations. One is that the expectations of the Afghans should be met. Number two is that you still have the international cooperation based on Afghan rules and Afghan principles, not Western principles. So that is very, very important.
Do you think that so the West is saying that they don't recognize the Taliban government if it's not democratic, right? Now, if we entertain that, like for example, right, words are important, and this is something that I'm speaking directly to the people watching the live stream here. This isn't me sort of talking down to anyone or whatever, but the way in which the media works and the way in which politicians speak and spokespeople speak, no word in a sentence is used sort of by accident or coincidentally. As someone that's written loads of articles myself, I can tell you every single word used has an intent and has a meaning behind it. So let me give you an example, right? Al Jazeera English, about 2 days ago, they had a report and they were saying ethnic minorities in Afghanistan fear for their future under a Taliban government. So now let's dissect that just very briefly. If ethnic minorities fear for their future, it implies, without saying, that the ethnic majority doesn't fear for its future. You see? Because if ethnic minorities fear their future, you know, you're specifying one thing, right? And which ethnic minorities, where are these ethnic minorities? That isn't mentioned. So by saying that, you're essentially arguing that there's an ethnic majoritarianism that is being reinstituted in Afghanistan, right? So now, similarly, everyone gets what I'm saying here. The wording is very deliberate. So when the West says, or Western countries, let's say Canada, Britain, the USA, etc. I think we had Habib Tam Angrezi, we had on Sky News earlier, you had the British Foreign Secretary saying that we need to exert, you know, all of our leverage in a positive manner so we can get sort of a democratic system. So if we're saying that the current Taliban government or the interim government or whatever we have going on at the moment is not democratic, you're implying that the previous setup was democratic. You see? Because if you're punishing one for not being democratic and you weren't punishing the other, logically, by necessity, it means that the previous one was democratic. But it wasn't democratic. Okay? It quite frankly wasn't. Women's rights were not respected. The president's chief of staff, we know, was pretty notorious and was and is increasingly known as Kabul's Casanova because he liked to engage and indulge in whatever, and he would give government jobs in exchange. So women's right, all of the criticisms that are being leveled now or could be leveled now at the Taliban, those were those could equally, if not more, apply to the government. So clearly, on the basis of what I've said, democracy, women's rights are not the yardstick by which the West measures its policy toward Afghanistan. But now here's the thing. Why have they suddenly turned antagonistic? I would say one of the reasons, and I want to hear both of your thoughts here, I'd say one of the reasons is sheer pettiness. It's also one of the things that Sangar and I discussed last night, Habib. I said there's a lot going on in Afghanistan and in Kabul, but we all woke up to the scenes of Kabul airport, and all of Afghanistan for that moment was reduced to Kabul airport. Why? Because there is a vindictive element that the West, after its failed invasion, after its failed occupation, after its failed attempt at social engineering, doesn't really want to see Afghanistan in the aftermath of the West's destruction sort of try to patch itself up and, you know, move forward. It doesn't really want to see that. And for that reason, I would say one of the reasons for the West's sudden belligerent attitude to a group with which it signed a peace deal is motivated by that vindictiveness and that pettiness. But that's my opinion. Are there any other reasons in your opinion? I want to hear both of your thoughts.
Sangarjan, I would like you go first.
You want me to go first? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we have to understand that something that we discussed last night as well is that the occupation of Afghanistan was ideological.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the fact that they were saying we occupy this country because we want to make it democratic and etc., that's a very important element, and I think we have covered that aspect elaborately. But there is another important aspect to this issue is that Western countries have this strange relationship with non-democratic, non-liberal societies where they only talk about those matters when the other country, the non-liberal, non-democratic country, is not powerful enough, when it's not, when it doesn't have enough money, when it doesn't have enough weapons. In that case, they will not have any qualms dealing with that country. You know, if it's a powerful country. But when it's a very poor, weak country, not industrialized, with a very primitive economy, then they become very ideological. And also, even if it's a rich country but a small country, like for instance, I think it's what was that small Islamic emirate somewhere in Indonesia?
Brunei.
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 Yes. So Brunei is too small and too insignificant to exert any sort of power in the international arena. So if they impose any sort of laws that are not respected or not accepted by Western countries, then they can sanction that country. And the same thing applies for Afghanistan. Yes, Afghanistan is a huge country. We have a huge potential to become a very wealthy country because of all the rare earth minerals in Afghanistan. But sadly, we are a landlocked country that has been at war for the last 43 years. We can't even feed ourselves, so we do not have the luxury of saying we want this kind of government or that kind of government. We want to pursue this kind of political and religious beliefs or that kind. No, Afghanistan is very weak, and that's why powerful nations have the privilege to say, look, you will receive help, you will receive international recognition only if you play by our rules. And that's the most important aspect of this matter, in my opinion.
Well, I think we just received a donation on the super chat.
Yes, we have received $20 from SSKK. Thank you very much for your donation. This is the second super chat we have received ever.
And we got a patron on our Patreon as well. But yeah, essentially,
Habib, you need to come more often, please. It's all because of you.
All of your patrons will disappear eventually.
No. Please come. Please come.
I mean, so we could say that the West's policy is you can be undemocratic, you can kill your own people, you can have government ministers, figures who rape boys, you can have the president's chief of staff can be Casanova, but as long as you do it in the name of democracy, all is okay.
I would slightly disagree with all of that.
Okay.
And the reason is, first we'll talk about a little bit of theory. I'll pretend to be Ashraf Ghani. He'd love to talk theory, right? And then we'll go to real world.
Much to the detriment of the country.
Yes. So first thing is, when we talk about a region, right? You generally have 4 different kinds of powers. One is what we call the hegemonic power, a specific region, right? The other one is what we call the competitor. Then you have the third one, small powers. And number 4 one is the extraterritorial power. So automatically the hegemonic power becomes the one with the strongest military, strongest economy, the most stable institutions. That becomes your hegemonic power. Relatively spends less on military expenditure compared to the competitor. What the competitor does is it spends far more on the military budget as compared to the hegemonic power, because it tries to match its military might with that of the hegemonic power. Most of the time what happens is that the hegemonic power and the competitor, they're at odds with each other. And then you have the small powers. So the small powers, what the hegemonic power and the competitor do is that they try their best to have the small powers on their side, because it further translates into might and influence.
So we could say in the current circumstance that countries like Turkey, Iran, and Pakistan are the smaller powers.
I would look at South Asia. So when we talk about South Asia, India considers itself as a hegemonic power.
Okay.
And Pakistan considers itself as the competitor.
Yeah.
So that is in specific to the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, right? So Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Maldives, they become small powers.
We have received another super chat, $30. Thank you for your great work. Mashal Olumi, thank you very much. This is the third super chat today.
We just got,
really appreciate this.
Spoke too soon because we've got a fourth.
Okay. Fourth super chat. From the US, keep up the good work from ABM. $9.99. That's, you know, guys, you are really amazing. This is very generous, and I
I'm
really appreciate it.
don't think that I'm 9 son for not talking. I'm quite literally taken aback.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you,
So,
guys.
Habib, please carry on. Sorry.
So then you have the small powers. So we have already covered that. Then you have the extraterritorial powers. The extraterritorial powers are those that are not necessarily in this region. They are far away from this region. They're not physically present, but they have vested interests. Okay. Now, when we talk about Afghanistan, whether the hegemonic power is there, whether the competitor is there, the small powers, the extraterritorial powers, no matter who is there in controlling or ruling Afghanistan, they all have vested interests. And one thing needs to be communicated very, very properly. Either either they all get to have it, or none of them can have it so sort of separately. In terms of the the international recognition, sorry guys, who would have thought that once the government of Chiang Kai-shek in China was overthrown in 1949, he was sent to exile, and the Mao Revolution succeeded. Who would have thought just about 21 years down the line, you will have even 17, 18 years down the line, you had the ping pong policy at its full threshold. The United States trying its best, and the likes of their national security advisor doing its best under Johnson to recognize China because it was about vested interests. Who would have thought that the Americans and the Vietnamese will get along with each other? Because after that bloody war, and Saigon becoming Ho Chi Minh City, what General Von Giap did to the Americans, and suddenly they were partners. It's because of those vested interests. And mind you, democracy values doesn't play much of a role. It doesn't play much of a role when we talk about vested interests. They all get to be they get bypassed. They get bypassed. And by no means I'm saying that they should be bypassed in Afghanistan as well. But once we talk about vested interests, these recognitions happens automatically. You have a lot of resources. Like I said, either they all get to have it with their fair share by Afghan rules, or none of them gets to have it.
But then Habib, sorry, I'm gonna let's entertain this slightly, okay? Values, ideals don't really matter. It's about interests. But now here's the thing, right? It could be argued that the West in Afghanistan has a severely underdeveloped country that has just come under the unified control of a single group for the first time, let's say, in about, I mean, I know Panjshir and these places are not taken over fully and there hasn't been a full enough, but with the way things are going, we can forecast that by the end of, let's say, this month or the next month, that the whole of Afghanistan will be, for the first time since 1973, because there was still Jalaluddin Haqqani started his jihad against Dawood Khan in about 1975, and there were the Ikhwan as well. So since 1973, this is the first time potentially we're having one group unifyingly controlling the country, right? So the West has an opportunity here to have that one group in power of a severely underdeveloped country, that if the right amount of resources and investments were diverted to it, that country could become a bulwark and an ally of the West in that region, in a region in which China is increasingly powerful. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, I will.
So we agree here that the West has an interest in an Taliban-ruled Afghanistan or a Taliban-dominated Afghanistan, despite, let's say, qualms about the Sharia, but pragmatic on an IR sort of level in terms of global alliances, an Afghanistan that is firmly in the Western camp is in its interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's choosing to bypass that in favor of values, in favor of ideology. Wouldn't you? So can we really say that they play a small role, or could we not say that ideology itself can be an end, can be an end unto itself?
Um, Look, I recall an interview by Ambassador Khalilzad on Tulu
Okay,
News, and he actually made a lot of sense back then.
okay,
When there was desperation in Kabul, when I'm talking about 2 years ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago, when desperation suddenly started to happen, that well, we might have the Americans leave, because then the American and Taliban talks were at full swing.
mhm,
Any day you could have had the deal finalized. So the well-known journalist Lutfullah Jafizada asked him a very, very good question. He said, when you leave, and if Taliban takes over,
Very bold question.
yes, what happens to women's rights?
mhm.
What happens to democracy?
Yeah.
And Ambassador Khalilzad answered it very boldly as well. He said, see, that is not the reason why we are here in Afghanistan. We would love to see that in Afghanistan, but that is not why we are here in Afghanistan.
Okay, but
Okay, just
is
before
he is
before
he not is
just
he
one
not
second.
sorry? Okay,
Just 1 second. We have 100 Swedish krona donation from Hasibullah Siddiqui. Thank you very much. We are having an incredible day today. Okay, please continue. Thank you.
so Sarah Adam has also donated Singapore dollars, and if anyone's going to ask me how I know the abbreviation, I actually used to work in a currency exchange bureau prior to Corona, which basically torpedoed that job. But in any case,
Thank you very
um,
much, guys.
thank you very much, Sarah Adam. Honestly, the reason I'm not talking much, like I said, is because there's I'm taken aback as to yeah, I'm just taken aback, man. Honestly, you can see it in my face, and perhaps I will write a special message to each and every single one of you. But thank you, and I'm really happy with the fact that you guys are enjoying our live stream so much. Now, Habib, could I not counter that point of Zalmay Khalilzad and say he was actually just just reflecting the stance of the administration for which he worked at the time?
And Biden, when it was about troops withdrawal, was more or less following the same path.
Hmm.
That's not why we were there. We had our own objectives.
Okay.
But now when it comes to the future government, suddenly these norm comes into play.
Okay.
You know what I mean? When so it all has to do with the political communication for his own public. That's not why we were there. We were there because of the imminent threat to the
Okay.
United States of America. But when we talk about once it comes to the international community, it's about, the future government now needs to be held accountable, as far as human rights, women rights, all of those rights are concerned, which should be. I mean, the future government should have make sure that these rights are in place, but nonetheless, they get bypassed when it comes to vested national interests. They get bypassed.
So you wouldn't say they're an interest in and of themselves?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, that's a decent. What do you say, Sankar, briefly?
I would say no. I have answered already extensively that question, but I think uh, I concur with everything that Habib said. I would just say that these analysis that we are doing right now, actually, most of the things that Habib is currently saying, we need to write this down in Pashto and have it published. Okay, because some of these perspectives and how those international relations and interests and etc. are uh, the way the nature of these matters really are is something that is clearly not known. You can clearly observe that from the fact that in Kabul we had a regime for the last 20 years who obviously seemed to be oblivious to all of that. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, we don't know to what extent the Taliban are aware of this, but I do presume that they have to also be made aware of this, that look, any decision you take right now has these huge consequences. And I think it's the responsibility of us Afghans. We are now here addressing these matters in a for an international audience in the English language, but most of these perspectives need to also be translated and communicated to people who are in Kabul right now. Don't you agree?
I would, but I think this ties into another question that was asked by KJ Khan earlier. Where do the Taliban see themselves on an international, in the sort of international relations dynamic, right? So let's say the Taliban, for let's just entertain the thought. They say we want a, we just got another super chat donation. I'm sending a few extra dollars to support your platform. We need more independent voices who are telling the truth to contrast the US mainstream media.
And
That is
one more.
That is exactly why our platform exists. That's been our ethos from the very beginning. It's been the fact that if we don't speak, no one will speak for us. And we witnessed that for 2 decades, and we can witness that in the coverage of the past days, which is why we endeavor to have experts like Habib Wardak, as well as others, by the way, to join our podcast. But obviously, there are other constraints like people living in different places of the world and time and all of that, and the fact that Sangar and I work. But we are trying, inshallah ta'ala, to do exactly what you have donated money to us for, and to continue to do it more prolifically. But going back to the question of KJ Khan, who asked, where did the Taliban see themselves in the global camp? Okay. So let's entertain the thought. The Taliban go full on Emirati. Okay, they don't have a parliament, they have a shura. They go all the way to the end in terms of enacting, let's say, a classical Islamic polity. Now, that'll get it sanctioned, would you guys agree with me, by the West, the European Union, North America, right? That would get it sanctioned. But it would also provide an ample opportunity for China, because China doesn't actually care what you do at home, as long as you don't talk about what it does at home. And what it does at home is obviously genocide. And the Taliban are not oblivious to that. They've just basically come along and said, look, guys, we have sympathy with everyone, but for the sake of this small country that we have, we can't fight China. So whilst we have sympathy, there's not really much we can do. And you know what? Fair enough. They're being honest about it. But obviously, the Taliban don't want to be pushed into a corner whereby they have to rely on China, because they can see what's happening in Pakistan or in other countries as well, where China's sort of model of foreign policy is becoming deeply scrutinized. And if you asked me, would I rather be a Chinese ally or an American ally? The Americans always ditch their allies, but I'd still go with America. Okay. But where do you think this will lead and play out in terms of the domestic dynamics of the role of religion in the state? And we know that Islam and modernity are topics that are always trending and hot topics. What sort of the sensible course of action whereby the Taliban can function as a bridge, right, between East and West in this new Cold War between the superpowers, with one of them more ideological than the other, but the other one more genocidal than the former? Habib.
Yes. To be very honest, I think the Taliban have negotiated for 2 years, more than 2 years now, 3-4 years with the Americans, and I think they have a very good understanding of the Americans right now. They have a far better understanding of the Americans than perhaps all of us do. And I think there's already we do say that the international community is watching. When President Trump had cancelled the peace talks, if you recall,
Yes.
everybody, the Ashraf Ghani was like the happiest man in the world.
Of
He just
course.
got a lifeline. And all I said was, I got in trouble for that interview as well. I said, all it's going to take is another 2 tweets. Yes, it did not take another 2 tweets to resume the process. It took a lot of backdoor diplomacy. But end of the day, it started again. I think there is a understanding in principle with the Americans. And the reason that the Taliban, had it been about China, the Taliban could have been very reckless about their statements in terms of the rights. But when it's about the West and that understanding in principle, therefore there's a lot of prudence and caution in terms of their statement as far as the rights of the Afghans is concerned. So I think they have the confidence they have very good relations with the Chinese via Pakistan, and specific to the past 3 years. But I think they've also agreed in principle with the Americans. So it's not going to be very long when the Americans will open their embassy in Afghanistan. Mark my words.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, I have another question, right? And this is actually an interesting question. I hadn't hadn't sort of thought of it this way. Why are the Taliban using the Afghan? They're not using RTA, Radio Television Afghanistan, but they're using Talor. They're using private media. Why?
Because of the viewership.
Okay.
Solo has far more viewers. It's far more famous than the national radio television in Afghanistan.
But surely the more patriotic thing to do would have been Radio Television, or do you think that doesn't matter?
I think for now it's not about whether it's patriotic or non-patriotic. It's about putting the message across.
I see.
Yeah.
And the second question is, do you foresee that Hamid Karzai and Abdullah will be in the future government? And if so, in which capacities?
I don't foresee that.
You don't foresee that?
No.
What about Engineer Sebek Matyar?
I don't foresee that.
You don't foresee that?
No.
Do you think in the instance that that doesn't happen, that they would try to cause trouble?
They might have some role when we talk about this provisional transitional setup.
I see.
But beyond that, I don't foresee it.
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, guys, we need to switch to the announcement of the new president of Afghanistan, Mr. Amrullah Saleh. So I want to first play the audio, and then if you like to comment on that. Are you still up to it, Habib?
Yes, bring it on.
Okay. All right. So just to give you guys a little bit context, what happened is that the vice president of the former regime, Mr. Amrullah Saleh, who is a native of Panjshir district of Parwan province. Am I being too toxic now? Okay.
You know what? Let's
all right. So
let's
anyway,
wait until the new administrative divisions. But
so
let's now say Panjshir province.
Yeah, so Panjshir province is the home of Mr. Amrullah Saleh, and Amrullah Saleh was, according to reports, trying to escape Afghanistan just like Ashraf Ghani. But there are numerous reports saying that 47 airplanes that were trying to cross Afghan border into Central Asian republics were denied access, and they were forced to turn back. So most of these airplanes were forced to turn back, and they landed again somewhere in Afghanistan. In some cases, they landed in Panjshir, and they say that Amrullah Saleh was one of the people who landed in Panjshir, and so he's currently in Panjshir. But Ashraf Ghani managed to escape because they say that his airplane was diverted, but he flew off to Oman. So that's basically the story. But in any case, Mr. Amrullah Saleh has now declared that he is the president of Afghanistan, and we are going to play the audio clip that he released, so you guys can listen to. Let me just mute myself.
Sangar, people are saying they can't hear. Yeah, we can hear.
You can hear, but
Just give me a second, guys. I've been watching the chat. Like, can we stop the India, Pakistan, Afghanistan debates? Like, please.
yeah, and we have received another super chat from AYK, $1.99, and he says it was my idea. 50% as mast. Thank you, man. Zindabad. And we have ABM, another $4.99, sending a few extra dollars to support your platform. We need more independent voices who are telling the truth in contrast to US mainstream media. Thank you very much, guys. I will try to play the audio again. I hope that you guys can hear it.
Apparently, there's now an echo.
As per the Constitution of Afghanistan, if the president absent or he resigns and he becomes incapable to run his conduct his duties, the first vice president automatically becomes the legitimate caretaker president. Since President Ashraf Ghani has fled the country, he has effectively left his responsibilities vacant and his position vacant. I am currently the legitimate caretaker president of Afghanistan because I am inside the country. I am reaching out to all leaders of Afghanistan to consolidate this position and this statement that I have just made. I want to make it very clear that there are many factors why this situation happened. I am not ready to be part of the humiliation and shame that the foreign militaries have endured. I am standing for my country, and the war is not over.
Well, the first thing that I would say is that it's very interesting that he gave that statement in English.
He actually did that in Farsi as well, and he did it in English as well. Can I just have a brief comment on this?
Yes, go ahead.
He's actually right. He makes sense. As per the Constitution, if he is only in Afghanistan, then he is the legitimate president.
Apparently, there's an echo. Who's got an echo?
Is it mine?
Habib has echo. By the way, guys, we got a super chat from Dawn Hunter saying most Americans are sorry about mucking up your country. Great echo, great content here. Thank you so much, Dawn Hunter. Honestly, I am humbled.
The echo is gone.
Okay, is it still echoing, guys?
No, it's gone. It was my mistake. I turned on two double audio tracks, so my mistake.
Okay, so Habib, you were saying Amrullah Saleh is right. He's not wrong.
Yes, as per the Constitution, he is right. Given if he is in Afghanistan, given that he has not fled, he is totally right. He is the legitimate president.
Okay.
But here's the weird part of it. Our Hazara brothers has a very good proverb. It says कि जोर qalib nadra. Zor qalib nadara. That's how would you say it in Farsi, but in the Hazaragi dialect it's Zor qalib nadra. As a president of that regime, who will you give orders to? Everybody has defected. The international community has run away. Your own employees are calling you the ex-government. So what happens to the legitimacy? Somebody has already taken over everything. So it just doesn't make sense. What he's trying to do is he's making a mockery out of himself. I would say let bygones be bygones. And follow the track of consensus, like so many, like Ismail Khan. You can call yourself the president, but who will you give orders to? Where does your legitimacy comes from now? It's gone, man. And that constitution that was disrespected by you and your boss who has run away and his cronies, that you kept saying that this is our red line, has already become, with all due respect, a piece of trash. But it has costed us more than 60,000 lives of just the ANDSF because of you guys, because of the ego. There was a very good statement coming from Biden yesterday, saying that I kept telling him that negotiations and consensus should be the way forward. And these jokers were telling them, no, we can withstand this. We are ready for it. We can fight it out. And this is what happened. So what he's trying to do is, the fundamental question is, why is he putting a statement in English? I think he might be thinking that you will have the Indians coming into play, their role, where they'll back me up and it's going to form into a resistance, just like the Rabbani era that was there in 1994 when they left Kabul. The Russians might come in and play their role, but the matter of the fact is that nobody will come this time because they've all learned their lesson. And this shuttle diplomacy that the Taliban have done over the past many years, Doha to Moscow, Doha to Tashkent, Doha to Islamabad, Ashgabat, that game is basically over. Yes, the question of India is there. There were quite a few articles that got leaked there, how India wants to connect to the Taliban, as far as the protection of their investments are concerned. So I think there's a lot of interest within India to sort of build that relationship with the Taliban as well, because they have come to the realization that that's who are we going to be dealing with for the next, I don't know, many years. And that is the real force to reckon with. So when it comes to their investments, Chabahar, Zaranj Dilaram Highway, Salma Ban Dam, all of that. So it's basically this group. So he is basically putting a statement in English where he might have somebody come, as far as the international actors are concerned, and support him and support. That's where he's going to get his legitimacy. By the ex-constitution, or by the ex-constitution, like I said, he makes sense. If he is in Afghanistan, if he has not gone to Tajikistan, first of all, it's not verified where he is, whether he's actually in Panjshir or not. This is true that a lot of planes have been flown into Uzbekistan. The other account is that just a few helicopters have been taken to Panjshir, because Panjshir you cannot land a fighter jet. So just a few helicopters are there in Panjshir, nothing beyond that. The rest, you have quite a few planes and airports in Uzbekistan. That's another news. So it's quite debated, but it's not going to make a lot of sense. From what I understand is that a lot of our viewers might be asking, why has Panjshir then not fallen? So I think the approach from the Taliban side is prudence and caution. As far as they're dealing with Panjshir is concerned, they don't want to create headlines. I think they're waiting. They're busy as far as the shuttle diplomacy is concerned with Dr. Abdullah Karzai. And I heard Mullah Brother has already come to Afghanistan, and they'll be there in Kabul very soon. And I think once that is taken care of, once that consensus of that provisional setup is reached to, then Panjshir will be dealt with. That is what is my understanding. Other than
I'm
that,
just going to cut you off, Happy. We'll be back. Guys, I'm going to start muting you if you don't stop the Pakistan-India debates. We're
And
talking
cut
about
with the
Afghanistan
racism.
here.
No,
Yeah,
no racial
no
epithets or
racial
anything.
slurs as well. I don't get it. Like, we're talking here about Amrullah Saleh, Afghanistan, Taliban takeover, Zabiullah Mujahid. You guys have turned this into racial slurs against Indians, Pakistan versus Afghanistan. Sorry, I wish it was Pakistan versus Afghanistan, as then at least it would be then relevant to us. Pakistan versus India, we're not interested, man. We're talking about sort of domestic things. Please, can we stop, guys?
All right,
But yeah,
please. Sorry.
could one of the patrons be a mod for today to stop the racism? We do need a moderator, and I did ask people yesterday to email us at info@afghanaye.org with a cover letter, telling us why they want to be a moderator and why it's been why they have transferable skills for it. But in any case, I think our next one will be moderated. But Habib, what is it with there was a question that was good. Yeah, I think the fact that like wouldn't Amrullah Saleh realize that all of the border crossings being seized, Sher Khan Bandar, these would preclude the opportunity for Indians or Russians to just sort of fly in aid to Panjshir, because before it was going through Kolab and then from Kolab to Farkhar and Takhar and all of these other places. But that's not even a possibility anymore, because even before Kabul and all of these places were seized, the Taliban sort of did a multi-pronged attack, seized all of the border crossings. It's not even feasible. So is he blind to this, or is there something else that he's thinking, or just a megalomaniac?
No. I think he's not blind. I think he wants to. I think at the end of the day, it'll be about negotiate. It'll be about assurances. Just like you said, it doesn't make sense logistically. Panjshir being landlocked, having no access to any of the ports, logistically it becomes impossible. And to be very honest, right now I think it's game over. The internationals are not showing interest. Nobody
The
has.
French might have been interested at one point.
Certain individuals in France maybe, from what I understand, but not on the state level. And those individuals might not be strong enough to change the attitude of the state or government towards taking action and contributing to the cause of Amrullah Saleh. I don't think so. I think we have gone past that stage. And the other thing is, right now, we are in a stage where the internationals are like, we don't want to get involved in Afghanistan militarily anymore. We're just too fed up of it. The West in specific has been involved since 1978 now, 79 now. I think we have gone past that. There is no interest among the governments of the West in terms of military involvement in Afghanistan.
Okay, guys.
In any case, guys, we should start to wrap it up. And I say
Let's
start to wrap it up.
Just one important story that we still need to cover today before we wrap it up. So, as you guys know, there are many women's rights activists in Afghanistan. We've discussed how these organizations were created in the last 20 years, how they were financed. In previous podcasts and live stream, we also mentioned how people were actually being paid to go attend courses on human rights and women's rights, etc. So it has become a business. So for those people,
just before that, there's just a question from Hasibullah Siddiqui, and he's asked the question a couple of times. We haven't managed to get to it. Salam. Many government employees / officials have been given a general amnesty. But will the Taliban provide justice to Afghans who have suffered by the group's attacks? No. And the reason for that amnesty is we forgive you and if you forgive us. And what happened before was the past. We should move over and we should move forward. We may have committed war crimes and atrocities just like you guys did. And now that the war is over, the main problem was war. Now that the war is over and we ended it on our terms, we're giving you an amnesty. But if the justice is being relegated to mercy on one side, it's being relegated to mercy on the other side. So they are expecting it to be a two-way thing. But yeah,
there is one more aspect to that story that you guys need to bear in mind, and that is actually the nature of wars in general. I will tell you guys a story that will perfectly make this clear. So when I was a student at the university, in our introductory course in international law, our lecturer explained the origins and the history of international law, and he explained that after World War II, you had the Nuremberg trials, and people were convicted of committing crimes. And at the end of the lecture, a stubborn, typical Afghan that I am, I stood up and I said, I have a question, sir. And he said, yes. I said, you just explained that after World War II, the Germans were tried and prosecuted for their crimes. But what about the bombing of Dresden in Germany? Dresden is a city that was entirely flattened. Okay, thousands of civilians died, and
and it was done intentionally.
Yes, and the atomic bomb that was used in Japan against the Japanese in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I said, if after the war the Nuremberg trials were a perfect venue to show the world that there is something as international order and international law, then why were the Allied forces not prosecuted for Hiroshima and Dresden? And the lecturer, who is actually a very good lecturer, a very nice guy, he's certainly not a stupid person. He just simply didn't have an answer. He just stared at me. The color of his face changed. He kept staring at me like it was a very awkward, maybe 30 seconds. And then he said, because might makes right. That was his answer. Might makes right. And the one who has won decides who is going to be prosecuted and punished. And that's exactly also what happened in 2001 in Afghanistan, when the United States and Allied forces invaded Afghanistan. They chased away Taliban and they established a new government. Obviously, they killed a lot of people. Marshal Dostum is on record for committing war crimes during that initial period, but he has never been tried.
Amrullah Saleh is known to have committed atrocities all throughout the duration of the previous regime.
And none of them have ever been convicted or tried. So this is the very brutal and very ugly face of war and conquest. Because there's this is why there is no justice in war. You know, you cannot expect that out of this kind of conflict something beautiful will emerge. And this is also why, as human beings, we should be opposed to war, because at the end of war you will always have some injustice that is not going to go away.
I wrote an article on someone that will be published not on my platform but on another platform, and when it is out, I hope you will enjoy it. But I spoke to the person, a certain person on a certain side of the conflict, and what they said that Pajanki, the Jang halwa per tolu weshil keji, the halwa of war, halwa being sort of a confectionery, the sweet or the halwa of war is distributed to all to varying extents. Some it's not distributed evenly, but the halwa of war is distributed to all. No one escapes it. And so, like I said, that general amnesty that's been announced, it's obviously very good PR. It makes them look very sensible and very rational. But it's also, there's an implicit expectation in return. Nothing, there's no such thing as a free lunch. If we're announcing a general amnesty for everyone, then no one is also going to be asking us to attend trial in court. So in a way, the Taliban have broken this cycle. But yeah, that
Lijan,
was.
we are talking a little bit of theology over here. I have a question from you and Sangar, because this is a bit confusing for me, and I would love to sort of have this fixed in my mind. Now, there is no doubt that whoever came to power in Afghanistan had their set of atrocities. They committed their set of atrocities, starting from 1978 when the communists took over in the Sour Revolution, I assume.
1973, I would say, when Daoud Khan killed Maywandwal, who was the former president, prime
Yes.
minister.
So now, when we talk about conflict resolution, peace, post-conflict, positive peace, this one concept of transitional justice comes into play. This word, okay, that peace without transitional justice, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? And to be honest, when post September 11 intervention / invasion, depending whatever you guys are comfortable with, this debate of transitional justice became quite relevant for a good period of time, and a lot of us now believe that it had its own political agenda, not that they were going to implement it, but to make sure these warlords walk the line. You scare them of transitional justice for what they had done during the communist revolution, the Mujahideen times, and then maybe even subsequently the Taliban time. But the Taliban were gone by then. One good debate was that, okay, where do we start from? Okay, fine, do we start from 1992, or do we start from 1978, or you just even talked about 1973, 74, that era. Where do we start from? Now, the concept of on one side we have the transitional justice. On the other side, this concept of general amnesty was first introduced by Sibghatullah Mujahidi when he took over. When the government, the communist regime fell in 1992, he came up with this idea of general amnesty. Now, when we talk about Sharia, when we talk about the law of God, now obviously you have two things in Islam. One is what we call Haqqullah, and the other is what we call the Haqqul Abd. Meaning, if you do something that basically harms another individual, God in his capacity, which is the highest, cannot forgive you until that individual does not forgive you,
because you didn't transgress the rights of God, but you transgressed the right of his creation.
Exactly. Now, what sort of state are we talking about that is more powerful than God itself? So if God, because when we talk about atrocities, human rights violations, we're obviously talking about individuals. So where do the state gets its legitimacy when God itself does not have that legitimacy to announce general amnesty? What happened to the rights of those individuals who were killed, who lost, they were put in mass graves? Where do the state gets that legitimacy or that power from, where God itself does not have that?
That's that's a brilliant question. That, to be honest, I think who
I've been thinking about it. It's
the thing is that for us people who believe in the fact that there is ultimately justice, even if it's not in this world, yeah. So even if we as human beings live in a life of suffering and injustice, we believe that if somebody has violated our rights and we die on the day of judgment, uh, Allah will call everyone to account and He will distribute justice. And this is what gives us some sort of sense of security and comfort that, yes, even if the world is very unjust, we believe that there will be divine justice in the hereafter. But now, the question that you asked about the role of the state in this matter, it's a very profound question, and honestly, if I would seriously think about it, I couldn't just come up with an answer right now. It's just
I'm going to be thinking about that question for
I,
weeks.
I've failed because a lot of these people are gone. A lot of these people are gone beneath the dust, and communist mass graves. We are talking about women raped, women's breasts being cut off. We are talking about attacks. We are talking about collateral damages. Now these people are gone. They have nobody left. And now God cannot forgive you because it's about the right of one of his banda, the slave, I would say.
yeah.
And certainly God does not have the right to do that. He does not have that capacity, that legitimacy, but the state does. How?
It's a very, very difficult question. We have a few theologian friends, yeah, and we were supposed to invite one of them last year, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But due to all the crazy events that were, everything that was happening, we could never invite him. But I think this is the question for our theologian friend. When we
Mm-hmm.
have him finally on our show, we should actually forward this question to him now and then announce that we will have him as a guest, and then we can have a whole show where we delve into this very philosophical matter.
And
And
I would love
one
to.
of
I
the
would
other
love to
reasons,
actually listen to it. I
Yeah,
would. I would want to have an answer to that. And so
I
where
mean,
there has
I
to be
mean,
some sort of justification that I'm not aware of,
yeah.
and I would want to have a look at that justification.
I'm gonna try answering the question, knowing that I'm not qualified in Islamic exegesis in interpretation of Quran and Hadith, just as a layman. Okay. Now, for all of those who are more learned than I am in the religious sciences, I once again humble myself before you, and if I'm wrong, please do correct me. I don't like to talk about things on which I don't have an idea. My understanding, which my flawed, potentially flawed and incomplete understanding, is that in Islam, the type of government that the Taliban want to institute is that of an Amir. Okay, so and the Amir has the prerogative to essentially, for the time being, issue moratoriums or exemptions on divine law. Okay, and one of the examples of that is when Hazrat Omar banned the punishment of the cutting of the hands for thieves during a period of famine, right? That's the example that everyone uses. So I guess the what would happen is that according to the proponents of said Amir, what they would say is that in order to foster harmony in society, to help society move forward and prevent further bloodshed by way of grudges, etc., the justice is relegated in practical importance to the need to move forward. So the answer would be a very sort of practical, pragmatic one, because that aspect to governorship, to lawmaking, according to Islam, it exists and it has existed for sort of hundreds or if not a millennia. But once again, yeah, there are people in the. That's why I use the word. Someone is saying Hazrat Omar froze the punishment, did not ban it. Yeah, that's why I use the word moratorium. It's a Latin word for sort of temporary, an exemption. It's in the name, it's an exemption, right? I'm not saying that he banned it. Those punishments obviously exist and they're part of religious law, but that would be the argument, I guess, that they would posit. But once again, we should probably have a Taliban spokesperson on the channel and ask not just a theologian, but a Taliban spokesperson that I guarantee you they'll be left as gobsmacked as I was.
And
Guys, yeah, just before
sure.
you continue, don't forget that thought. Uh, will you please like the video if you're still with us? And I just want to know, is Mina W still in the chat, because I owe her an answer. She asked a question all the way before we even went live, so I want to be able to answer that question before we go offline. So yes, please, your thought.
Yeah, so one of the reasons this question came up was because of my father primarily. When I had joined a position in the previous government, it was a very exposed position. Exposed, I mean, in a way where you're exposed to different contractors, you're exposed to huge companies in the mineral sector of Afghanistan, and I worked there for only 27 days. So when my father got to know about it, he asked me that, how are you going to deal with corruption? Now, if somebody offers you something, how are you going to resist it? And I said, Dad, I don't know. He said, how do I trust that you will be able to resist and not actually indulge in an act of bribery and or corruption or Ponzi scheme? I said, well, because I trust myself, and it's basically my values of integrity that is going to stop me from that, and I'm going to stop it. If I think I'm not going to have an impact, I'm just going to just give up and not do it, which is eventually what exactly I did. So he told me that was actually a very, very good lesson, and I never knew this. He said, look, if at one point of time you were like a little bit of hopeless, thinking that you don't have enough finances, if you indulge in bribery, you're gonna make a lot of money and buy a house, buy a nice car for yourself. Don't ever do that, because then how would you be able to answer 35 million population? So if you were really, really in need of that and you had no way to do it, then what I would do is find a gun, get into a few houses, stop people, rob them off, but do get their addresses. So tomorrow when you get rich, make sure you pay them back and just tell them that these were the 8 people that I can ask for forgiveness, and they may be able to forgive you. But if you take a penny from the government money, how are you going to ask for forgiveness from 35 million population? And this is exactly where he then started talking about the issue of transitional justice. And I was like, wait a minute, then how does that work? Because if you say Haqqe Banda is so important, then just because somebody has committed human rights violations, and now God cannot forgive him, but the state does, and he did not have an answer to that as well.
Well, Sangar, you were talking about women's rights before we got into this question about amnesty, and
Yes.
so that was Hasibullah Siddiqui. I was talking about wrapping up the live stream, and you asked such a question that led us to such another profound question.
Yeah.
But that's why we're here.
Okay.
It was a brilliant question, but we'll move on now, Sangar.
All right. So let's move on. So here we have a audio clip that has leaked today. And I want to give a little bit context before we play the audio. So guys know that we have women's rights organizations that were established in the last 20 years in Afghanistan, sponsored by Western governments, embassies, NGOs, etc. And we also have earlier discussed that these human rights organizations and women's rights activists, etc., the problem behind these organizations was that it was, to a certain extent, a genuine concern about the well-being of women in Afghanistan, which is a serious matter. Women have serious problems. There is suffering, pain, and whatnot. But then the problem is that the suffering of women and the suffering of people and violation of human rights becomes a business model. People know that if you apply for funding because you promote certain values or certain ideas, then you can be assured that if the political climate is right, and if there is enough media coverage and enough outrage in the media, then you will definitely get your funding. And that has been the reality in Afghanistan in the last 20 years. And this is also why people are very skeptical about anyone who says, I am a women's rights activist or I'm a human rights activist. It has seriously damaged the credibility of these people and those causes as well. And one of a very specific example of this kind of this travesty is the audio that has leaked today. And this is not just one audio, there are also other messages. Women's rights activists who are currently based in Canada, North America, or UK, they are sending messages to young women in Afghanistan, especially in Kabul, and they are telling them that they should go out in the streets and do things that sort of provoke some sort of response from the Taliban, and make sure that you have your cameras, your mobile phones with you to record it, because if there is an incident, then you can publicize it, and the international media is currently focused on Afghanistan. What are the Taliban going to do? Are they going to punish women? Are they going to ban girls from school? Are they going to whip people, etc., etc.? So for that reason, they're telling them just go and do things that may provoke some sort of reaction, and make sure that you have your phone with you. And I have shared that on Twitter, and I'm going to play the audio. But before I do that, both of you know Sima Samar, who is a very prominent human rights activist. The audio that we are going to play, we are not 100% sure if that is really Sima Samar. I have tried to verify, I checked, I listened to a lot of her interviews and everything. I'm not 100% sure if that's her. So let's just have a huge caveat that this may not be her, but her sound is very similar. So here we go, guys.
به هر ترتیب اینا زیر فوکس جامعه جهانی و زیر فوکس فعالین مدنی در بیرون از افغانستان و زیر فوکس تحلیلگرای سیاسی و همچنان رسانه‌های داخل و بیرون از کشور هستند. از این لحاظ بهترین موقع هست که شما چادری نکنین، فقط امو چادر طور که مویتان معلوم نشوه بپوشین با یک چپن.
So she said that in any case, they are now under the severe focus of the international community of international observers. So for that reason, you shouldn't wear, we need to see what they will do. So don't wear a burqa, which is a face covering. Just wear something that will cover your hair just to see how they react.
و حتما باید سر کارتان برین، یعنی قصدی برین. میشه که با همکارا در یک جای چیز بانین، با همکارایتان در یک جای قرار بگذارین و به صورت دست جمعی برین که تو به صورت تکی پیداتان نکنن که آزار بتن، به صورت جمعی برین. باز از این کارتان میشه که و به خاطر شناسایی شما ماسک میزنین.
So basically, and make sure that you all go together, as in not alone, and hold hands, I believe, right? And gather and congregate in one place.
Destajami means go as a collective.
Okay.
Go as a collective. But she says qasdi karbarin, okay?
Yeah.
Qasdi karbarin. Like go intentionally to work. Like, yeah. Okay.
Just to add a little bit to Mina's question in this video. Mina, what we have seen personally myself is, these women rights in Afghanistan, I personally myself would love to, it would be the best day in my life where I see that women rights are actually not 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 only there, but actually promoted, safeguarded by the future government. But what we have had over the past 20 years was very, very cosmetic in nature. It was a very exclusive club in Kabul and perhaps two, three other cities of Afghanistan. The rest, everybody was excluded. I still remember very well when there was the March 8 International Women Day. I think it's the March 8, where you had a very cosmetic celebration. About 200 women have come together, and there was a night raid operation in Wardak with a drone strike, and it had killed a woman with her infant baby in her lap and two children, age 2 and 6. Right, she tried to cover them, and the roof had fallen over her. No woman in that conference hall. It was it was attended by the former CEO Abdullah himself as well. Nobody talked about it as of what happens to that woman who had just died as a collateral damage.
Okay, so I'm not going to play the entire video because we can't translate the entire video. I think it's 2.5 minutes. But Mina W.
T-Sipper is just saying, so this is just a way of protesting. Is that really that bad? No, it isn't. But if you consider the fact that she's basically doing something or encouraging something that, according to her, could get these women killed, it is bad. So
Yeah.
it's not bad if we're looking at it from the outside in, but she is basically of the opinion that covering only the hair, walking together and going to work will trigger an extreme reaction. So she's egging women on to do that for the sake of her ideological or political motives, which she
Okay.
believes could actually get them killed.
And
You
and,
see?
and Mina is asking, what did she say that deserves a hateful Twitter post that is retweeted 200 times? Why do you think punching down women serves your objectives? Okay, good question. I like when you guys pose this kind of questions because now we can have an honest conversation about this matter. Why I think people should know that this is happening is exactly what Waleed has said. You see, there are women in Afghanistan, young women, impressionable women. I was a young man. I was also influenced as a young man by a lot of matters. Luckily, I wasn't that much influenced to do something that is harmful to me or someone else. But I know that young people, especially Afghans, where we are very passionate people, we can be easily influenced to do things that are very harmful and dangerous. And this is something that we should address as a community. You cannot sit in Canada or in North America with your foreign passport, enjoying a perfect life, and then sending messages via social media telling young women in Afghanistan who are terrified that Taliban may whip them and kill them, and telling them, no, what you need to do is grab your mobile phone and go to the streets and wear your scarf like this and do this and do that. This is basically like using those women as cannon fodder for her ideological goals. This is not caring about women. And that's why people need to know what is really happening, how people are being manipulated, how they're being used. And if you really genuinely care about people, whether it's about women or generally all Afghans or ethnic minorities, whatever, you should never, never go and manipulate people in this way, and it's basically throwing them to the lions. Because what if Taliban attacked those women who were protesting in the beginning of the live stream? We discussed that those women who were carrying those signs and they were protesting. What if the Taliban would have attacked those women? would that achieve anything that we want to achieve? Because it proves some point. It proves, yes, I was right, Taliban are oppressing women, or no, this or that. No, what it does, it destroys people's lives. People are suffering. A young woman should not be subjugated to any kind of dishonor and disrespect. It doesn't matter who she is, where she's from, and what her political beliefs are. That's what matters. And these women or men or whoever they are, they shouldn't do that. They shouldn't do that, and this needs to be exposed. And with regards to the second part of your question, punching down women, you know, this woman has so much money and power. She can basically cancel anyone if she wants. She's a very powerful person. Okay, she has traveled around the world. She met world leaders. She has been given all sorts of awards. She has been interviewed with all prominent media around the world. She's safe. There are even reports that when she was the head of the so-called Independent Commission for Human Rights, two Lexus SUVs, new with 0 kilometers, were gone out of her office. Okay, those Lexus SUVs were donated to Independent Commission for Human Rights, and they just vanished. And people in Kabul who are very well acquainted with her organization, they were spreading this claim that is not verified. Again, it's not verified, but they say that people in institution like hers, what they do is they receive donations for cars and stuff like that, and then they sell it and then take the cash. This is not something that is a fabrication. These things happen, but it's quite plausible that her organization has done that as well. Now, when we have this kind of reality in Afghanistan and this kind of mode of operation of these so-called human rights organization, if we genuinely care about people in Afghanistan, men, women, children, minorities, majorities, religious minorities, or anything, we have to be honest and say you cannot fight for justice and people and their rights by manipulating people, by throwing people to the lions, or by using them as cannon fodder. That's something that needs to be condemned, and that's why I tweeted that video, and I don't think that what I have said in the tweet is hateful, and I stand by that decision, and this is my justification. And if you disagree with that, let's just agree to disagree, but this is how I feel about it.
I would also add that it wasn't Sangar's decision to get it retweeted 200 times.
Okay. Okay. Anyways, guys, we have had another 2.5-hour stream.
Mina W is saying, Sangar, the summary of your response is Taliban are dangerous for women and they're easily provoked.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, no, I'm just gonna say, I mean, if that may or may not be your opinion, they may be dangerous for women. They may not be dangerous for women. The events of the past days and the events of the coming days, weeks, and months will prove that. But I think what Sangar is basically trying to say that a woman, it's almost akin to, it's almost like when diaspora sitting in California egg on Afghan army soldiers to fight instead of surrender, because they have some sort of ideological goal to fight against Punjab, whilst they're sat, and this is something we see, by the way, guys, we see it on Instagram, sat in California, sat in the Bay Area, have an agenda against Punjab, want Afghan soldiers to fight and die in a non-stop war, and the most that these people are willing to contribute to the cause is a hashtag saying "Sanction Pakistan" written on a banner. It's exactly the same thing. If you're not willing to sacrifice your own skin and your own blood into the cause, you shouldn't be encouraging other people who may or may not know better to do the same thing. There's so much of this that goes on in the Afghan diaspora and domestic Afghan sphere, where people in the diaspora egg on poor people or perhaps uninformed or misinformed people to do certain things that may shed their own blood, whilst they're basically sat and they don't have really much to risk. And I may add that that was why the whole Doha peace process, we were in favor of a negotiated settlement. Anything that kills Afghans is something that we, it's quite frankly, we don't want it to happen. We have the luxury, the benefit, the blessing of living in a society where we can talk about these things, and we're not going to have the secret police turn up to our house and shove us around in a black cell. And that's why because we've enjoyed those benefits, because we enjoy that safety and security, we want Afghans to enjoy that as well. And I think that more so than viewing this about women and men and privilege and this, that, the other, we should have a baseline or base set of principles that we agree upon, in which we should never put forth courses of action in which we know Afghans can be killed or they can be harmed. And if we are going to do so, we should at least be man or woman enough to actually contribute something to the cause. It's actually what Pashtun nationalists from Pakistan do. They want Afghan soldiers to continue dying in a non-stop crusade against Punjab, and they equivocate Punjab with Pakistan. Meanwhile, they're sat in Punjab, and all they're willing to do is wear red hats. And their right to peaceful protest is guaranteed by Punjab, right? So this wasn't a rant, but this is sort of, rather than men and women, and like I said, the Taliban can prove themselves XYZ in the coming. This isn't about the Taliban. This is about the principle that if you're gonna encourage people to spill blood for the cause, or potentially spill blood for the cause, you shouldn't be doing it in a place where you know that not a hair on your head will be harmed. And on that note, guys, this is the first chat in which we've basically had super chat. People have sent us donations live here. I'm so glad that all of you guys managed to stay with us. But you stayed with us. You listened to our discussions. You always posed really good questions. Even thank you to Mina for partaking,
Yes.
honestly.
And I really appreciate the fact that Mina and anybody else ask critical questions. You should definitely do that. You should also, like, we are sitting here challenging the dominant narrative, but you guys need to challenge us as well, okay?
No, of course, but that's
yeah.
the thing. That's the thing. Like, if we say something, it's because we have a rationale behind it.
Yeah.
I said earlier, every single article I've written, every single word in those articles, there's been an intent behind it. And if I can rationalize it, good for me. And if the rationale behind it is poor, then I should be called out on it. No one is above critique. And so with that in mind, thank you. Mina responded saying, thank you for responding. Thank you, Mina, once again for the question. Honestly, much appreciated. And, I think she said something about we should have a woman expert. There are 3 guys here. I mean, I've always said we don't have people on the podcast because they're men, women, and whatever. We are trying to get different experts on the live stream, but the problem we're having is that they either don't come, they live in different countries, we can't work out a time. So there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes that you don't see. But we are trying to get, there are actually 2 women I have in mind that I want to bring onto the podcast or to the live stream.
There is one coming very soon.
There is one coming very soon. Unfortunately for Sangar and I, we are 2 men. It's not really something I can do about that, although in these days you never know what can happen. But in any case, guys, thank you for staying with us. Thank you for positing questions, critical questions, thought-provoking questions. And on that note, for everyone that donated for the sole purpose of us providing a counter-narrative that you don't really come across in mainstream media, that is exactly what we're doing and what we aim to continue to do. So please share our content.
Don't forget the super chat. We have one more super chat.
We have one more super chat from JZ, was converted to 16 Doge. Take that, Ahmed-waleed. Thank you, JZ. Honestly, much appreciated. But in any case, I'm watching the like button as well. Just before we conclude the podcast, because we've had more people come in, can we please like the videos so that more people can see it? And with that in mind, do share our content, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and Habib Wartag, dere maninacha biam rakhli da the star barakat da dona
It's my
donation
pleasure.
rakhla
Very happy to be here.
the
Okay.
star barakat.
Thank
And
you.
inshallah ta'ala, we aim to have more live streams, podcasts, more content, and the encouragement of you guys is of paramount importance for us. But yeah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.